Moses' secret testimony to Zahid for the will of God in the spiritual world. As God spoke about the history of the prophets he mentioned, Moses is the only important messianic prophet who gave me such a great hope because his heart was truly beating for the chosen people. This fact inspired me so much in heavens that I came as a visible God to earth. Moses' sympathy and his sensitive heart for the chosen people enabled him to disregard the power of the Pharaoh. He turned his back to all earthly fortune and comfort because he could not see and bear the suffering of God's chosen people. If he had only had enough patience, he would have become the new Pharaoh of Egypt. But he preferred the way of a beggar to free God's people. He was the only one who brought God's people to the gate of the promised land. Based on the foundation laid by Moses, Joshua could lead God's chosen people into the promised land. Again, the question arises, why couldn't the ideal environment be realized in the country from which was prophesied that milk and honey would flow there? Honey represents God's love, and milk symbolizes God's divine knowledge. Even by entering the promised land, God's world was not there. We will get to know the reason for this directly from Moses' life story, which he told me in the spiritual world. I met Moses several times in paradise in the white light realm of the angel world. The heavens mentioned that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad were the main driving forces for the providence of God and heavens. The kingdom of God came so close that it almost touched the earth. But it disappeared again, and everything that remained of it was just a concept. Whenever I met Moses in the spiritual world, he looked at me with a smile and asked me to travel with him in his realm of paradise. However, he tried to avoid a deeper conversation. He listened to me, but remained silent. Once I went to see him. I told him that I wanted to know more about his earthly life, especially about the time when he helped as a central figure to advance God's providence. He stared at me, but could not hide his inner pain about the subject. One day, while I was meeting God, I asked him, I want that Moses tells me about his life during his mission. Humanity should at least find out why your world was not realized at that time. God replied, I will ask Moses and Muhammad to speak to you about this topic. I urged further, but I also want that Jesus talks to me about his earthly life. God replied, whenever you ask him from now on, he will willingly do it. One day, when I was in Moses' dimension again, I saw spirits with so much light that I could learn to fly. Note, these places where the spiritual beings learn to fly are called airports in the spiritual world. Airports of this type exist in the most dimensions of paradise. Only the quality of flying and traveling differs from dimension to dimension and depends on the own light of the spiritual beings. The higher the realms of paradise, the more light they have, and of course the beings living there. Moses was gardening in a flower bed near the airport. When he saw me, he gave me a rose. I walked with him and met many other Old Testament prophets along the way. They all gave me flowers. Moses said to me, let's fly far away to a mountainside of paradise. There we can talk about my life in peace and without being disturbed. We then flew into the fantastic, colorful mountain world of paradise. Here the trees are hundreds of miles tall. From there you can look down into the dimension. Moses and I sat down on the top of one of the highest trees. Looking at this dimension, I mentioned to Moses that he lives in a beautiful dimension that looks like a wonderland. Moses then said to me, "Very seldom do human spirits come here. Zahid, but what do you want to know from me now? Where should I start? God in the heavens brought me to one of the highest dimensions of paradise. When I first arrived here, my mistakes on earth were brought to my attention through the angelic world. That truth was very bitter to me. I attended various seminars where the angels taught me how much I had blocked the will of God and heavens and why the ideal environment on earth could not be established. And all of that because of my behavior and fallen character. In the beginning, the angel world was very strict with me and reminded me of my mistakes, which prevented God from working with me directly on earth. If you come to paradise as a prophet, you have to face this bitter truth. Therefore, it will never be easy for you to relieve yourself from this agony. If I look back on the path of my mission, I can see that I have only lived with sorrow and pain in my heart and in my soul. I met you in paradise several times before, and even then you asked me to speak about my mission life. But actually, I was waiting for heavenly permission. Personally, I didn't want to take any risk by revealing the secrets of heavens. Since God and the heavens asked me to tell you about my life, I felt relieved. It's easier for me to talk about it now. Moses revealed to me, I come from the lineage of the Levites. I was born in a time of religious history when God's chosen people had to suffer extremely. People lived surrounded by deep sadness and under the painful tyranny of the Egyptian Pharaoh. That was also the time of the worst slavery for God's people. At that time, the Pharaoh gave the order that every newborn boy in the Israelite families should be killed immediately by his soldiers. His spies were therefore everywhere. The soldiers entered the houses of the families and killed without mercy every newborn son in front of his parents. They did this daily by carrying out their duty. It was an extremely frightening time and also a great test for the Israelites. I was born under these conditions in the Levi family. My father was not religious, but my mother was a deeply religious woman. She knew the suffering of God's people in her heart. She often prayed to God in the silence of the night. She asked him to send someone who could eliminate the suffering, pain, worry, and heavy burden from his people according to Joseph's prophecy. After that, she always cried silently. Before Joseph, the son of Jacob, died, he told his family, brothers, and tribe the following: Even if I die now, I know that God will never forget you. He will lead you from this nation to a country that he already promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This prophecy was known to all Israelites. One night during pregnancy, my mother saw a dream. In it, she heard the voice of God, "The child you carry within you will bring the salvation to my people." God promised her that after her death, she would reach a high spiritual dimension if she follows him with faith. this wonderful world of paradise was already shown to her. When I was born, she tried everything possible to hide me, but somehow the Pharaoh's spies found out and wanted to kill me. Before they reached our home, my mother saw a vision of heavens. She was supposed to put me in a tarred basket, carry me to the Nile and hide it in the reeds on the riverbank. Despite the vision of the angel world, my mother was not ready for it. After a while, she feared that maybe I would be killed by the soldiers of the Pharaoh. To save her newborn's life, the angel showed her the same vision again. They told her if she refuses again, the palace guard will kill her child. She still hesitated and couldn't make a decision. Just because she saw no other way out, she did as she was told when the vision appeared a third time. The angels had previously shown her that the Pharaoh's family would find me and take me in. Even so, my mother sent my sister down to the river to take care of me. She didn't take her eyes off me. My mother and the other Israelites knew that on certain days of the week, Pharaoh's daughter went to this part of the river to take a bath with her court ladies. My mother told my sister exactly where to put the basket with me so that I could be found by Pharaoh's daughter or one of her servants. Pharaoh's daughter, her court ladies and servants appeared early in the morning and walked along the river. They saw the basket and heard a child crying. Pharaoh's daughter ordered one of her servants to bring the basket to her. When she opened the basket, she immediately realized that an Israelite slave must have abandoned this child because of the Pharaoh's order to kill all the newborn boys. At that moment, she was overwhelmed with compassion for the Jewish woman. The Pharaoh's daughter thought that if she accepted the child as her own, there might be a possibility that the Pharaoh would withdraw his command. She herself could not give birth to children, and that was precisely why the desire in her to take care of me was very strong. When my sister watched from a distance how the Pharaoh's daughter played with me and held me in her arms, she asked loudly the Pharaoh's daughter to tell her something. She was given permission to approach. My sister reported that she knew a woman who could breastfeed this child. Although Pharaoh's daughter knew that my sister was in some way related to me, she allowed her to bring someone who could give me milk. My sister ran home and told my mother what had happened. My mother immediately appeared with my sister on the bank of the Nile, where she saw the Pharaoh's daughter holding her child in her arms. Pharaoh's daughter asked my mother, "Can you breastfeed my child?" My mother replied, "Yes, great daughter of Pharaoh. I just gave birth to a child myself, so I can breastfeed this child too." Then the daughter of the Pharaoh took her diamond ring from her finger and said to my mother, "When you come to the palace of the Pharaoh, show the guards this ring. They will let you in." She turned to my sister and said, "I don't know who you are, little girl, but it looks like you didn't fall on your head. You also have my permission to come with this woman to the palace." From the very beginning, Pharaoh's daughter suspected that the woman who was breastfeeding me had to be my real mother. Still, she allowed me to stay with my real mother for 18 months. She brought me to the palace 3 times a week so that the Pharaoh's daughter could see me for a short time. When Pharaoh heard that his daughter had adopted a Hebrew child, he was first very angry about it. But he loved his daughter so much that he couldn't refuse her a wish. So he had no choice but to accept this fact. And more than that, his daughter asked him to withdraw the order to kill all the newborn Israelites. The Pharaoh did not want to make his daughter sad or unhappy. His daughter also asked him how the Israelites could work hard for him as slaves if he let kill all the boys. In the end, there would only be women left. The Pharaoh liked this advice very much. However, his daughter's inner motivation was to save the male children of the Israelites. Finally, the Pharaoh took back his order. At this point, I would like to mention something about my mother and the daughter of Pharaoh. Even today in the spiritual world, the daughter of Pharaoh is my mother. Several times it came to the mind of my physical mother to tell Pharaoh's daughter that I was her child. Heavens then warned her every time in a vision not to do so. Only because of these heavenly visions could she keep the secret for herself. Pharaoh's daughter noticed how intensely my birth mother took care of me. So she asked her one day, "Who are you really, and who's the young girl who brought you to me on the day I found this baby?" Since the question was sincere, my mother told everything. In the end, she started to cry loudly. She begged and pleaded the Pharaoh's daughter to return her child. Pharaoh's daughter asked my mother not to cry so loudly. Maybe they could be heard by someone, and then the Pharaoh would find out the whole story. My mother would then be in great danger. She offered my mother everything she owned if I could only grow up with her in the palace. She even said, "If this is really the will of your God, then one day your child may become the future Pharaoh of Egypt and bring salvation to your people." My mother did not want to understand all of this. So she said, "Pharaoh took back this terrible order. My child is therefore safe and I want it back. God will take care of us." Again and again she pleaded to be allowed to return to her community with me to live there in peace. When Pharaoh's daughter saw how selfish and unreasonable my mother was, she used a different tone. She didn't want my mother's behavior to endanger the lives of the male Israelite babies again and to bring again suffering to these people. So she replied very angrily, "Go back to your people and keep quiet. If you ever say a word about this child, your whole family will die or end up in prison until the end of their life." My mother was so afraid that she could even shut up. I grew up in the palace of Pharaoh. My every wish was fulfilled. Pharaoh's daughter, who was a great mother to me, loved me very much. She absolutely wanted me to become the future Pharaoh after her father's death. She managed that the Pharaoh and I got very near to each other. The Pharaoh did everything for his daughter. She let me learn everything that was necessary to become the future ruler. While I was growing up in the palace, she said to her father many times, "My son will rule this world one day." She often took me in her arms and gave me a lot of kisses. When the Pharaoh saw this, he just smiled and felt very happy. At the age of 25, I became interested as a prince in the system of the monarchy and how the empire of Egypt could be extended. That's why I met representatives from other countries. As a prince, the Pharaoh allowed me to take control of some government affairs. Sometimes he looked at his daughter with a smile and said, "Your son Moses has all the talents and qualities that one needs to rule the world." My royal mother loved to hear such words from her father's mouth. I traveled through Egypt and the surrounding Arab tribes. I visited Goshen, the settlement area where the Israelites had to stay several times. I wanted to see how they lived there and what problems they had to face. The suffering and hardships of this people were great. Day and night they were pushed, suppressed, and beaten by Pharaoh's soldiers while they were doing their hard work. Pharaoh's courtiers and their people abused and treated them like animals. The Israelites performed the lowest work that no Egyptian wanted to do. It is very difficult to describe the situation by words. The Israelites feared every day that this would be their last. When I first traveled to Goshen, people surrounded me and started to cry out loudly. I didn't feel comfortable in this place at all. The voices came from all directions of the crowd. Many said, "O Prince of Egypt, son of the great Pharaoh, in the name of God, take this burden from us. Let mercy prevail." But I also heard voices that said, "O God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, soften the heart of the Prince of Egypt so that he feels compassion for us." O God of Abraham, how long does it take for you to hear our cries? Forgive us our sins and show mercy. O God of Abraham, since a long time our eyes have been longing for salvation. I heard this and similar prayers from all over the place. The unspeakable suffering of the Israelites touched my heart. At the same time I wondered whether the God they were praying to was really that strong. Why didn't he redeem his people and liberate them? I later learned through the Israelite community that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were their great prophets who had prophesied and promised many things to their descendants. At that time, Abraham was the main prophet to whom God promised the promised land where his people would settle down in peace and freedom. All nations would receive the blessing from the God of Abraham. When I heard their complaints and problems, I realized that they were going through unspeakable suffering and pain. But in their belief, they were fanatical and stuck to it under all circumstances. This belief made them live in a kind of dream world because they thought that one day they would rule all nations. I wondered about it. But in reality, they were backward, poor, dirty, and lousy. Sometimes I could hardly bring myself to sit down with the leaders of their community to listen to their problems because from their clothes came an unbearable smell. I understood that they were going through a terrible time and I felt I had to do something to eliminate their suffering at least as much as I could. Back in the palace, I talked to my royal mother. I told her what suffering the Israelites had to endure. I asked her if there was anything we could do about it. Then she asked me if I was there myself. I replied, yes, I wanted to know how our slaves are doing. She said to me, I will go to the Pharaoh with you. We will describe the situation of the Israelites to him. Maybe we can alleviate their suffering. We went to the Pharaoh. When he saw us, he said, Welcome, my daughter, and also your son Moses. My mother told her father that there was a special reason for our coming and maybe he could do us a favor. The Pharaoh said to his daughter, Ask me anything. Even if it is again the request that Moses shall become the new Pharaoh after my death. I will seriously think about it. You are my only daughter, and I love you more than anyone else." My mother embraced her father, kissed him, and said, "Today we would like to ask you a little favor. But one day, of course, I would also like to get your promise that my son Moses will become the future Pharaoh of Egypt. I am certain you will make a wise decision regarding my son." The Pharaoh smiled and said, "Moses is very close to my heart. I know he has the greatest talent to rule Egypt." Now I raised my voice and told the Pharaoh, "I was in the Israelite community and looked around there. They do everything you ask them to do, and yet your courtiers and their people treat them very badly. I would like to ask you to give me the responsibility for the Israelites." The Pharaoh looked at me and said, "Son of my daughter, if this is your wish, how can I oppose it? From now on, I am giving you the supervision of the Israelites. Keep them busy to build great monuments for Egypt. Prevent any rebellion against us." My mother said to the Pharaoh, "Father, you don't need to worry about the slaves. Day and night they work hard for their daily bread. They thank their God when night comes and they can rest. They don't even have time to think about a rebellion against you." The Pharaoh replied, "You have sympathy for these people. Pay attention. I heard rumors from this community that someone will come from their own people to free them from slavery. He will be the new king who will fight against us on their behalf." My royal mother and I left the palace after our conversation with the Pharaoh. I asked along the way, "Do you have any other information about the Israelites that I don't know yet?" She replied, "Yes, I also heard a lot of rumors about their belief. That is why they are hated by the Egyptians. The courtiers therefore tell Pharaoh only bad things about them. That is the main reason why the Pharaoh is careful with this community. Moses, you can dispel these false doubts from the Pharaoh's mind. Give him a new impression of this community that they are loyal to the Pharaoh. I promise to take care of this matter." Pharaoh knew that I was a child of the Israelites from the very beginning. His courtiers also knew about it and how I was found. All kinds of rumors were circulating around me as I grew up. But the Pharaoh and his daughter ordered everyone in the palace never to say a word to me about the Israelite slaves. This was only possible because the Pharaoh loved his daughter very much. Despite the strict command, I also heard of these rumors finally. So I went to my royal mother a few times while I was growing up and talked to her about it. She put her hand on my mouth every time and said, "Don't listen to the rumors. You are my son and I love you more than anyone else in this world. You are my eyesight through which I see and find peace in my heart." I felt how it hurt my royal mother when I spoke about this topic. At the bottom of my heart, I love my royal mother much deeper than my physical mother, even today in the spiritual world. I was very close to her during my lifetime on earth. She was seriously concerned about the Israelites. Through her, God gave me the greatest opportunity to become the new Pharaoh of Egypt and bring salvation to the Jewish slaves. I only got to know this bitter truth very painfully in the spiritual world. But through you, Zahid, I will now try my best to speak to you about the most parts of my life and why God's providence could not be accomplished through me. I took responsibility for the Israelites as Prince of Egypt. At that time, I also commanded parts of Africa in the name of the Pharaoh. After taking over the Israelites, I introduced various facilities. They had fixed working hours and enough food. I started to take care of them, and over the time I felt a kind of emotional closeness to them. I sensed that all the rumors couldn't be wrong. There had to be a hidden truth. However, my royal mother avoided talking about it because it hurt her emotionally too much. On the one hand, I made life easier for the Israelite community, but on the other hand, my royal subordinates complained to the Pharaoh that my concern about the slaves would be very deep. They said that the slaves would soon become rebellious and that this was not good for the power of the Pharaoh. They even went so far as to say that this was a danger to all Egyptians. Since then, my royal mother visited her father very often and tried to calm him down. She told him not to listen to the complaints because they were only against her son Moses. In fact, she defended me against all the royal subordinates. One day I went to the Pharaoh and he asked me, "Moses, I heard so many complaints that you would grant the slaves various facilities. I even heard you almost treat them like Egyptians. What do you want to achieve with it?" I replied that I had introduced a few workload reductions because the physical situation of the slaves required this. With healthy bodies, the slaves could work faster and better for the projects of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was satisfied with this answer and said to me, "You are my wise son. You surely know what is best for me." I found out that the courtiers and their people treated the slaves worse in my absence. They only held back when I was there. That made my heart rebel against their authority. They wanted to rule the Israelites as slaves forever. So I introduced something new. Whenever the Egyptians abused their power, the Israelites had the right to accuse them directly in front of me. I even appointed a few people who had to listen to the complaints of the Israelites and to solve their problems during my absence. But something else happened. The rumor spread that I was not only the prince of Egypt, but also one of the Israelites. I also heard that I had a Hebrew mother, sister, and brother, and even that my father had separated from my mother. At first, I tried to ignore this rumor. Gradually, my inner emotions pushed me to clarify this. I remembered hearing similar rumors when I was growing up in the palace. I already mentioned that I had spoken to my royal mother about it before. Since this hurt her very much, I no longer discussed this topic with her. She loved me so much, and I was everything for her. I said to myself, even if it was true what was said about me, I could only love my royal mother with all my heart. While growing up in the palace, I realized that she was the only one who could alleviate the suffering of the slaves. After all, she was the one at whose request the Pharaoh withdrew the order to kill all the newborn Hebrew boys after she had adopted me. Because of this, my love grew even deeper for Pharaoh's daughter, who was in my eyes my real mother. The next time I went to the Israelite community, I said to myself that I would find out where I really came from. I had appointed various Jewish leaders to deal only with their people's problems. There were some among them that I could trust. I told them that I heard a rumor that my mother, sister, and brother were still living in this community. I wanted them to find out secretly whether this was true. I could read in the leaders' faces that they were somehow pleasantly surprised to hear this from my mouth. The next time I came to them, they brought my mother, sister, and brother Aaron in front of me. They told me that I could ask them myself. I saw that all three were very scared. They thought I was going to punish them because of these rumors. It was also the first time for them to be so close to the Prince of Egypt. They were speechless and stared at me with fearful eyes. I told them that they didn't have to be afraid of me. I just wanted to ask them a few questions. Suddenly, Aaron started to speak to me. "Oh, great prince, you are like the Pharaoh. We don't know why they brought us before you. We didn't do anything. Oh, great prince, please forgive us no matter what rumors you heard about us. But we have nothing to do with all of this. How can we be part of your family? We are slaves under the power of Pharaoh, and you are a great prince." It's all nonsense what people say behind your back. When I heard this, I smiled and said to all three, "I promise that I will not punish you even if you did something wrong. I just want to know the whole truth. I just want to know if I'm really a Hebrew child and if you are somehow related to me. That is why I sent my closest advisors to bring you to me so that I could secretly ask you these questions. I guarantee that nothing will happen to you." I felt that I relaxed a little and my mother couldn't hold back her tears and started crying. I asked her for the reason, but she remained silent. After a while, my sister Marion broke the silence. "O great Prince of Egypt, our daily life is marked by suffering. We are Pharaoh's slaves, and you know that the Egyptian nation sees us as the lowest class. Our days are filled with sadness. We can only find some peace in our nights in the dark when Pharaoh's subordinates are asleep or enjoying themselves. We are the people who only live from day to day. If you really promise us that nothing bad will happen to us or our people, we will talk. Otherwise, it is better to forget what we were talking about." Then Aaron said, "O great prince, if the Pharaoh will find out that we influenced you wrongly or that we emotionally confused you, it may well be that he will let us be killed by his soldiers. In his eyes, we are nothing more than slaves and have no value." Aaron started to cry and could not continue talking. I said to them, "You know me since I became responsible for your community. I always tried my best to take care of all of you. I treated you better than the Pharaoh all the years before. His soldiers sat on your neck and let you work like animals." Aaron said to me, "O great prince, you are the light in our darkest nights that came to us after such a long time. Generations before us have been waiting for this dream to come true. So, we definitely don't want to make any mistakes which will cause us to lose you as a hope." I told them that they will not lose me, but I will become part of their family if they will tell me the truth. Aaron wanted to know, what about the Pharaoh? If he will find out something, all his anger will discharge over us. His soldiers will probably destroy us. Then our tomorrow would be worse than today. I replied, "I will take care of the Pharaoh. He loves me and my mother, Pharaoh's daughter, very much. I almost grew up in Pharaoh's lap. My mother and I will make sure that nothing happens to you and your people." Aaron was silent for a few seconds and stared at his mother. Then he asked them, "Tell the truth. Tell him that he is your son. The God of Abraham saw all our sufferings. A few 100 years passed in which we longed for the answer. Perhaps God sent this Prince Moses to help us, to release us from our suffering." My mother started to cry again. After calming down, she said, "It is true what you heard and what you will hear now. I am your mother, he is your brother Aaron, and she is your sister Marion." After that, my mother told the whole story from the beginning to the end. She spoke about my birth, my childhood, why she couldn't keep me as her own child, the Pharaoh's order to kill all newborn boys of the Israelites, and how I got into the hands of the Pharaoh's daughter. Then she remained silent. It seemed to me that the God of Abraham had accomplished a great miracle. Everyone stared at me with fearful eyes and expected an outburst of anger. But I only felt sympathy for them. I said to myself, "Moses, you have lived a comfortable life since you were born as a prince of Egypt. Everyone around you served you. Here are your family and your people. They stand in front of you and live a life as slaves." When I thought about this reality, I felt an unspeakable pain in my heart, and that made me speechless. I didn't know what to say to my physical family. How could I comfort them? Aaron and Marion watched my face very carefully. Then Marion said to me, "O Prince of Egypt, if we upset you, then we ask all three for forgiveness. We promise never to appear before you again. Please, never think badly about our people." Miriam's words moved me to tears. I embraced all three and we cried together. My mother was deeply touched. After so many years of separation, she couldn't hold back her tears. I asked Aaron to keep the secret within their family. I also asked the Jewish leaders who were in the room with us to keep the truth that they heard for them. Everyone was relieved, happy and moved in their hearts that I got to know the truth. Each of the 9 people in the room promised to keep the secret for him. When I returned to the palace, my heart was very heavy. I didn't feel like talking to anyone. I just wanted to be alone. At that time, I was engaged to the daughter of Pharaoh's brother, whom I loved very much. We grew up together and were drawn to each other in a very heartily way. It would be ignorant of me if I didn't mention my feelings for her. Her name was Reason. It was she who knocked on my door and wished to see me that day. I opened the door for her, and when she came in she asked me, "What is the matter with you?" I replied, "Nothing, I'm just tired." But she didn't give up. "The Pharaoh and your mother are worried about you. You didn't even show up for dinner with the Pharaoh and his courtiers." I asked Reason, "If I tell you a secret, will you promise me that you will keep it to yourself? Maybe you can give me some advice on what to do under these circumstances." She said, "You know, Moses, I love you more than anyone else in the world. You don't have to hide anything from me. I can see from your face that you are very sad." I replied, "That is very true." Then I told her all about my family. She listened attentively and patiently. When I finished speaking, she said, "It doesn't matter to me, even if everything you just told me is true. It also doesn't change our love and relationship that you are descended from the Israelite slave community." Then she held my hand and said, "Let's go out into the garden to the waterfall. The evening is beautiful, and it is fantastic to breathe in the many scents of the flowers. There, I will give you my best advice on what to do under these circumstances. When we reached the waterfall, I felt how I was doing better. This was an absolutely quiet place. There she asked me, "Moses, if I give you an advice now, will you follow it? Or will you just listen to it?" I said to her, "Reason, I love you very deep in my heart. I don't want that the time will come when we are separated. So, give me your best advice that I don't make a mistake in this emotional moment. My heart cries when I see my people suffering like this. Now I have found out where my real family lives. My heart is broken by just thinking that I have lived the most comfortable life in this place. My own family and tribe live with unspeakable suffering every day and endure the painful life of slaves. The voice of my conscience asks me how I can continue living in the palace after experiencing the reality of life. Then I started to cry. Reason took me in her arms and said to me, "The life of the Prince of Egypt changed quickly after he experienced the suffering of these people. From now on, you have to do every step to make the life of your people better. However, you have to be very cautious and patient with this new situation." Then she advised me, "Help your people from a distance, but do not interfere too much in their problems. Do not let the Pharaoh know that your own family lives among the Israelite community. Do not give the impression that you are too much emotionally involved in the affairs of the life of these people. Pharaoh has heard many complaints and doubts about you. There are rumors that you are not treating the Israelites according to their status. Moses, Pharaoh knows from the first day on that you are a Hebrew slave child. He just ignored it because his daughter found you on the bank of the river and adopted you as her own son. Only for this reason did he withdraw his order to kill all newborn Israelite boys. It is thanks to your royal mother that the killing came to an end. Only because of her are you so close to the Pharaoh. That's why he doesn't want to see any other prince on the throne except you. You are like his own son to him. In you he sees all the skills that the future ruler of Egypt needs. All the kindness surrounds you because your mother, the daughter of Pharaoh, loves you extremely. Moses, you know very well Pharaoh loves your mother as much as she loves you. You have to take advantage of this." Reason also told me that the Israelites had been living as slaves for a few hundred years, and this under the regimes of various pharaohs. Now I should wait patiently until Pharaoh will die and then take over his empire. As Pharaoh of Egypt, it would be very easy for me to free my people. No power under the sun could stop me, and I would have the power to give a few Israelites high positions in my political affairs. Reason was absolutely certain that I could put an end to the suffering of my people. She said to me that I would be a very wise man if I hid the real situation from the Pharaoh. I replied, "I am proud that you will be my future wife. You gave me the right advice, and I will follow it."